transition over here to my screen share. Oh, my top of my head's been cut off a little bit there. Let's just fix that really quick. Good evening and good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're from or where you're watching this. Thank you very much for joining us today on the live stream. Today, we're going to be looking at digital signage specifically for corporate communications and focusing and honing in on some of the core facts that are beneficial when it comes to managing Signagelive and actually delivering content with Signagelive to that. So to get started, as you can see, we've got my screen up here, which is just a little bit of statistics. It says, you know, we love big stats, and this is what we're kind of going through. So 70% of employees in the US specifically, this case study was taken from, are not engaged at work. 31% of employees never participate in company intranets, and up to 80% of workplace communications contain jargon. 69% of employees say they would work harder if they were better appreciated. A huge amount of this comes down to, well, how can we help with these stats? How can we improve these things with digital signage? So a lot of it is about engagement. As you can see, all of these statistics are all about how do we engage our users, how do we engage our staff, and how do we get people motivated and understanding what our corporate identity is. And especially when we're talking about branding, that goes a long way in understanding brand loyalty and brand kind of dedication, depending on where you are within the business. So if we go down here a little bit, so some kind of counter stats based on how Signagelive works and how digital signage works as a whole with that corporate culture. So companies can achieve up to 25% productivity improvement as a result of a better employee engagement. If you see it, you want to learn more about it. In fact, 59% of individuals who see digital signage want to learn more about the topic that's on the screen. More than 45% of improvement on brand awareness and effectiveness, and that's what we're talking about, that brand recognition internally, not externally to clients or customers, but this is to your own staff. Digital health and safety communications reduces that workspace injury by 20%. So we're talking about a few different levels when we're talking about digital signage in corporate communications. We're talking about branding and awareness. We're talking about health and safety. We're talking about corporate messaging in terms of what's important for internal recognition and recognition as a whole when it comes to recognizing staff achievements, when it comes to recognizing company achievements and goals and kind of the legend of the company as you go through that. One of the biggest struggles with larger corporate entities, and especially if even the medium-sized ones, is making sure that everyone is on brand, everyone recognizes what is the core driver for that corporate entity, whether it be, whatever industry you're looking at, whatever that corporate industry is. It's about getting the message across to all of your employees and letting them understand what is core to the beliefs of the company. And that's where digital signage can really come in handy, because a lot of the other kind of passive content that we're talking about here, such as intranets and things like that, they actively take someone being able to go in and review that content, whereas digital signage can be something that people pick up in the background. They can see it as they walk through the environments that you've built for them to go to workspaces or to lunch spaces or whatever other kind of corporate environments that we're talking about here. So let's go over to our kind of slide deck here, and we'll talk about that in some more detail, specifically focusing in on what Signagelive can offer when it comes to corporate environments and where the benefits will lie there. Some of these things we kind of picked from the previous live stream, so if you've seen the previous live streams, you may have seen some of these elements, but it's nice to have this kind of condensed into this one video so you can really understand where we come into benefit for corporate comms. And this is one of the kind of largest verticals for Signagelive. We do a huge amount of work within the corporate space because of the need to drive that messaging is so important, and the ability to be able to update that is really, really crucial and vital. So heritage, just before we get started, Signagelive's heritage. Signagelive's already been used in hundreds of corporate environments, ranging from tens to thousands of active players per network. So if you're a small or an SMB looking at 20, 25 licenses, 25 players, absolutely fine. If you're looking at just one or two, that's fine too. But we do work on that larger scale of the 1,000 plus activities when it comes to managing, and that's definitely more of a global scale and a global management. And you, from a global perspective, may have a slightly different remit of questions and queries that you want to make sure that you get answered, and we'll cover some of those off today. So Signagelive is well positioned to offer the requirements that corporate entities may need. We've over 20 years experience delivering digital signage solutions and are ideally positioned to enable you to deliver a market-leading solution. We are global, brand supporting deployments over 40 countries with our head office in the UK, which is where I'm currently not located, but close by, offices in the US, Singapore and Australia as well. So that's just a little bit of background around us and where we've come from. So one of the core features that is often requested is single sign-on. Things like Okta, OneLogin, Azure, with the ability to connect your users, logins, especially if you're in an IT or tech department, you'll understand that the ability to have single sign-on really benefits you. For those that aren't aware of what single sign-on are, or as you're kind of starting to go through this digital signage process for the first time, single sign-on allows your users to incorporate their Signagelive login with whatever other logins you're already managing through these single sign-on services. So if you have a single sign-on to log into your mail account, yet your kind of dashboards online, then you'll also be able to include Signagelive into that to control your Signagelive login access via one kind of main portal of whichever one of these you choose to go with. So we do work with single sign-on. We understand there's a huge benefit for a management capability, and that might not be in Signagelive directly, but we understand that this is alleviating a headache for those in the IT department having to manage those user experiences. So that is all built in as an option for you to enable within the Signagelive platform as well. Network management. So for those in control of the network maintenance, and again talking to you guys over in IT more specifically now, network management is a crucial point of how Signagelive works. So it is our core branding, really, our core value. Signagelive has built the platform to deliver all of the information and reporting, both at a glance, so simple dashboards, something you're able to view and digest very quickly and easily, because at the end of the day, if everything's working as it should do, you don't want to spend a huge amount of time looking through reporting and making sure it's all working. You want an at a glance health check. Is everything working as it should do? Yes, no. If yes, then fine. And obviously that most of the time will be the case. There is also a verbose reporting. So if you do need to go into a more granular detail, or you find that a particular player has an issue and isn't connecting as expected, you can delve into that in further detail and start to kind of bug out what is going on with that particular device. So verbose reporting is available, and that's historical, so you can go back to any time frame just to have a look at the logs and see how that's working. That works on the players, but it also works on the users as well. So if you need to go back and check on what a user has been doing, then you can do that from an admin perspective as well. This is not something that a local user, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, has the capability of doing. So there's different levels of hierarchy within the Signagelive platform, allowing you and your users to have different experiences just depending on how in detail you need to be able to control the platform. Administrators will also be able to control access of users from within their account. So the local user and the kind of master user or an administrator is something we'll talk about in a moment as well. There are two crucial features that are really beneficial that I wanted to mention: tagging and conditional playback. Now, tagging is the ability to go into each range of players. So however many players that you want to, you can go in and tag them, give them a particular keyword, whether that be a location specific or whether it's portrait or landscape orientations. You maybe want to be able to track those players based on what users have access to them or who's responsible for them, whether it be HR or marketing or whatever that kind of internal resource is. You can tag your players with those tags. The benefit of tagging is there's no limit. You can have as many different tags associated with one player, and you can use those tags to granularly search and find for the players that you want within the platform. So it may be that you want to go and check on the health of all of the HR-based players, and you can do that. But what that kind of pulls into is conditional playback. So conditional playback is the ability to deliver content dependent on those tags at any level. So if we consider that what we really want to do is have 6 different locations, and I'm going to put an asset into my playlist, which I know gets delivered to all of those 6 locations, but then tag that asset to only display in LA or New York or London or wherever it might be, you can start to register where that content will or will not turn up based on those tags. So conditional playback utilizes the tagging functionality to specify what subsections of available players are able to play back the content you're publishing. This allows you to broaden and minimize the volume of players you need to manage and gives you ultimate granular control as to when you need it. This is also suitable for those users as well. So if you're an administrator, and what we often see is that someone in IT, for example, has the responsibility of managing the network, but they don't want to go and manage all of your environment or the content delivery as such, your local users will be able to utilize these tags as well if that's a function you want to give to them. So let's take that as an example. We've got Sandra at HR who wants to be able to control all of the content to all of the HR departments across the global region. However, Sandra does not want to deliver this particular HR message to London because their VAT or their tax exemptions don't work in the same way. So we're going to exclude that asset in that playlist based on that condition. It gives them the granular control to make specific exclusive pieces of content dependent on whatever those tags are. Another benefit to the tags are they're pretty immediate to change. It's not a whole process to add additional tags. You can just type them in onto the player and they'll get added immediately. So if a situation arises where you don't have that tag already there, you can build that within seconds. It's not a predefined list. It can be very fluid if needs be. The alternative, obviously, is you think of the tags in advance, build them out in the way that you want to, and then everyone knows what tags are available. Marketplace. We've talked about the marketplace in previous videos, but it's core again to the way you can deliver corporate communications. One of the biggest things that we find with corporate... Oops, hit my microphone. One of the biggest things that we find with corporate communications, aside from a lot of other verticals when we're talking about retail or we're talking about advertisement or anything like that, is a huge amount of those verticals have dedicated users that know their programs when it comes to creating content. They know Photoshop, they know Premiere Pro, they know After Effects, and they have the resource and they have the software to run that. What we do find sometimes in corporate communications is people want to give users access to go and upload their content that maybe don't have that skill set, or they just don't have the software to build that content out. Now, instead of saying, well, go and find that software and go and find that content and train yourself and make all of that content, what Signagelive has built is a marketplace full of content for those users to just go and grab. Most of them are editable in some way, shape or form. They can just have a nice background image with the ability for you to type in some text like the notice board app. That's mostly beneficial if you're looking to deliver content to the screen really quickly with some nice artwork behind it without too much hard work being put into actually creating that content. On top of that, you've got things like calendar integration and Office 365 and Google Calendar integration there, which will pull all of that data into a nicer track loop. News and weather, some of the lighter elements that maybe aren't about pushing your branding or that kind of that core company culture out, but it is beneficial attract content to get users looking at the screen in the first place for the information that they're looking to find, and then you can feed in and trickle that information around the edges as well. So we know that so to kind of summarizing that, we know that all Signagelive users have access to content creation tools. Not all users have time to go to make their own content either. To help those users, we've created the Signagelive Marketplace. 2 new pieces of content are added to the Marketplace every month, pretty much at a minimum. This range from integrated calendar applications to simple notice boards that can be amended at a click of a button. One of the things that we're also working on is a range of things like menus. So if you have an internal canteen and you want to be able to give your canteen staff the ability to just go and update a menu with a nice attractive piece of content, there's a range of those for you to go and find as well. And this is continuously growing and expanding. For those in the corporate environment as well, we also support things like Power BI, Gecko Board, Grow, and a range of other dashboards when it comes to sales data and metrics as well. And if there's one on there that you want to deliver that we don't have the ability to display straight away, then let us know, because this is potentially something that we can build out for you, depending on what it is you're looking to deliver. So the marketplace is core, and it's free, unlimited, to any amount of users. As I mentioned before, you can have as many users as you want on the platform, so there's no limit to how many people you can have in that marketplace, pulling the free content and creating the playlists from them. Proactive monitoring. So proactive monitoring is where we want to see the ability to be alerted on changes on our network without actually being in the network itself. One of the cores, again, for kind of those in the IT department, is being able to be notified if anything is happening to a player when it shouldn't be, and rather than having to have Signagelive open all the time, proactive monitoring allows you the ability to receive messaging or email alerts based on certain parameters that you'll put into the platform, like if 90% of my players are up, then that's fine, but if it dips below 90%, then we need a warning. You could have it set up for individual players if a player goes down to receive an email. That can also be built into a ticketing system. Some examples that we've talked about before and looked at with other clients is the ability to connect into something like Zendesk. So if you already have a support team or a team that deals with tickets on a regular basis, you can plug the Signagelive API in for proactive monitoring, so it receives a ticket and builds a ticket whenever something goes wrong with a player, and that can then be dedicated to one of the IT staff members to go and fix. So for those managing larger networks, proactive monitoring module allows those administrators to be notified of any player or network issue without the need to log into the Signagelive platform. Proactive monitoring could also be connected to external monitoring platforms, such as a ticketing system if required. Just another core benefit, especially on those larger networks that you've got running, especially for corporate communications, where you maybe can't see every screen that you're running and you want to be notified as soon as something was to happen. The broadcast player. So we have talked about the broadcast player in some detail in a previous video, and I'll show you an example of the broadcast player in a moment. But the broadcast player is a new addition to the Signagelive kind of player family. And what the broadcast player does in lieu of what we normally do, which is having one device and then one license that goes with that device, you have one license for your broadcast player, and that is a URL that you can deliver to as many different individuals as you want. So you can have the broadcast player display on thousands of individuals' home computers, especially obviously right now with a lot of us working from home. It can be really beneficial to just say, here's your link, we'll update it with the digital signage that you normally receive in the office, and we'll keep you up to speed with what our company culture is doing. The broadcast player URL can be delivered on a range of different devices, so it doesn't necessarily have to be laptops, it could be phones. As long as the browser itself works, then you can just paste in that link and it will load up with your digital signage messaging as well. So digital signage is a great way obviously to communicate with your office, but this is really for those key remote workers, those that maybe aren't in the office all the time. Maybe you even got someone that works on the road most of the time and you want to try and replicate that messaging that you get internally with the digital signage out to those staff members as well. It's a great addition to what you may already be using within digital signage, because you can still send exactly the same content. There's no additional work to be done unless you want a completely different message on that broadcast player. You could copy and paste in essence what you've done on your regular digital signage, but just have that set up on the broadcast player URL and send that out to your staff in an unlimited capacity. Local playlists. We're going to demonstrate this in a moment, just a bit of an example of how local playlists work. But local playlist in essence is taking a playlist and putting another playlist inside of it and then dedicating a user to look after it. The benefit of that is that you get the ability for that local user to only control a small portion of a screen. Now, it might be that your screen, for simple terms, is split in two. The left-hand side is your global communication, where you're delivering all of your global content, and the right-hand side is that local playlist, which can be delivered content to by that local user and that local user alone. You as an admin can always go and amend that if you want to, but importantly, the local user can only affect maybe 2 or 3 screens on a certain location, whereas the global messaging will be everywhere in an identical situation, but the right-hand side will be unique to each location based on that local user's control. The benefit of this, and what we often see, is people saying, well, we have a staff of 200 or 300 and we want local individuals to be able to go and update their content with content that's very relevant to them and them alone on site, but we don't want them to go and affect the entire network, and that will be locked down to their experience. One of the core benefits on there as well is that training for this kind of system from a local user perspective is maybe 15 to 20 minutes long. They don't need to learn everything from scratch. It's not a particularly complex system. We've taken out and stripped back part of Signagelive just for them. So to review again, the local playlist allows administrators to create playlists that are available to those local users. This allows the administrators to divide responsibilities for the management of playlists to those who need to access them, without giving away too much control over the platform. The local playlist can be displayed full screen or within the zone of a screen, and it can even run as a segment of a global player which can be managed by an administrator. Let's hold that thought and move on to the next slide here, because local playlist with a master playlist is the next thing that comes up in these kind of lines of questions. So the example that I just gave you is we've got a screen that's split in two, and the left-hand side is our global content, the right-hand side is our local content. But what if we actually want to show full screen, or actually in this side here, we want to have a merge of the two. We want to have local and global kind of combine to make that total messaging, but we know that the local messaging is going to be individual to each site. Well, that can be done by use of a master playlist. In the same way we did in the example, we take our master playlist and we put our local playlist in there. What we're going to do is be able to add content to that master playlist that the local playlist user cannot affect, but they'll still be able to go and add in their local player content. And I'll demonstrate that in a moment so I can show you exactly what that looks like. Support. Now, depending on how much support you need from Signagelive, there are different levels. So we understand that it's key for you to have control over your own platform and have support when needed to get started, especially on the first instance of getting started with Signagelive. So we offer a whole range of different support levels depending on whether you're a premium or an enterprise level user based on the volume. You always get support free included with Signagelive. There's no cost for support as it stands when it comes to just having a conversation with us or our support team that are dedicated to responding to your tickets and your queries. But if you need additional support, if you need that additional support when it comes to regular network management meetings, or when it comes to having a particular account manager checking in on you on a regular basis to make sure that you've got all the training that you need, or regular training sessions, then that's what we can offer to you. So whatever level you need, we can offer to you, and we can tailor that to your needs as well. A lot of the times, especially if you're looking at larger environments, what we'll do is do that in the front half of getting you started. So we will train you and we will assist you in getting used to the way the platform works and asking the questions that you may need to consider, such as what kind of tags are going to be most beneficial to you, and then doing that activity of going through the tags that will be beneficial and then loading them into your platform, so when you go, you know you're ready to go. One of the other things that I want to talk about, so that's the end of my slide deck here, so I'm just going to go over to my other page here. So we're going to go over to the Signagelive dashboard. There are a couple other bits and pieces just to mention. From a hardware perspective, we are hardware agnostic. I haven't put this in the slide specifically because it's been discussed quite a few times, but we can support a whole range of devices, whether it's system on chip or whether it's a dedicated device. Some of those dedicated devices as well, in some use cases that we've had recently, which unfortunately I can't say the name of, we've had the ability to roll out hundreds of players in a day because of something called bulk provisioning, being able to enable Signagelive on a range of different devices, such as the Bright Sign, which has bdeploy built into it, and have them pre-configured with Signagelive, all the IP information, IP address information, anything that you need to get that player started, and provisioning that in one go. It could potentially save weeks of work, especially if it comes to taking a player, turning it on, installing Signagelive or the CMS platform, then entering in the unique code into the network. This would need to be repeated hundreds of times. With things like bdeploy, we can do that in an instant, and it will pull all of that detail to all of the players that you're looking to provision. Then all you need to do is simply get them installed, plugged in with an Ethernet and power, and you're good to go. So going back to the local playlist, what I wanted to walk you through today is just some of the things that we've experienced and talked about so far. So if what I'm currently looking at right now, by the way, is my playlist manager. So you can see I've got a range of different playlists which I've created in the past here. I can folderize these playlists to make the playlist the way that I want them to. What I'm going to do today is create a new playlist from scratch, which is a playlist could be delivered to one screen, it could be delivered to multiple screens. That hasn't been determined yet. We're just building out this playlist as we'd like to see it. Now, if I go and take some content, so I've got BBC, I'd like to show that. I've got this menu that I wanted to show that I mentioned a moment ago. Let's go see if I've got some notice board apps here that I can show you as well. Ta-da! And then I can click and drag those over. And as I mentioned, if you're a local user, some of those users that only have access to a few of the players or a few of the zones within a screen, this is their entire experience. They'll see the playlist editor and that's it. They can go in, add in their slides. I can double click on any one of these and I'll be able to go and amend the text. So here's my example. I can type in hi and then, let's just say hello. And then I can refresh and we'll see it will update on the screen. Nice and simple. It's not about having an arts degree. It's about getting that content out there in a stylish way that delivers your brand. Now, when we're talking about branding, these notice board apps we can actually package together for you with your branded background content. So we've got some example ones on here which are fairly generic to make sure it covers a lot of bases in terms of who may use it. But if you want to build something like this which has your own branding on it, that's something we can do and package together for you. It's not a huge amount of cost, and you can do it once you've done it once. You'll have it as a copy to use over and over again. So now I've got my playlist, I've got my rotation of a couple of pieces of content. We've got our control assets on the left-hand side, and in here I can then go and pick a localized playlist. Localized playlist, simply put, I click and drag it over to the right-hand side, and this localized playlist will then deliver the ability for that local user to go and drag and drop content right in there. If I double-click on it, I've got the choice to go to the local playlist controls, and I can enter in a name for that playlist. I can choose whether it just plays one of the assets for that local user or all of the assets from that local user before returning to my master playlist that I've just added in there as well. I've got the ability to randomize it, change the play order, change the number of assets maximum that they can upload. So if we go, well, actually, if they go a bit crazy and they upload 500 assets, let's limit that down to just 5, just in case they overload the platform and we don't get to see our global messaging anymore. You've also got the option to do a unique playlist per player, which I won't go into too much detail, but it basically means if this particular user has access to 5 players, do you want them to have access to 5 individual playlists, one for each player, or do they just want to have one playlist, and if they make a change to it, it will affect all of those players? Bearing in mind, you do have the ability to tag assets to condition where they do or do not turn up. So that's a little bit of an overview on the playlist editor and using that local playlist functionality. There is some more that you'll need to do in the background just to assign the user to this playlist, but it's in essence just a term of adding them to the network, giving them the player access, giving the localized playlist, sending that out to the player as well, and you're good to go. These are some of the features that are most beneficial to those using Signagelive in corporate communication. There are other elements as well, such as web triggers that we haven't mentioned, so I will go and talk about that in a second. Web triggers a capability of being able to deliver content based on any kind of trigger. A lot of the times this comes up in health and safety. So if you have a fire alarm system on site and you want all of your screens to turn into emergency messaging at that time, then that can be arranged. In essence, what you'll have is you'll have a playlist dedicated to the content that you want to deliver. For example, fire, this is our exit route, and it will be delivered to that screen and preloaded in the background. Then what happens if a situation were to arise, the trigger will trigger the content change within seconds on the screen and display that information. It's all preloaded, so it's not about having it upload as and when you need it. It's all preloaded in the background, ready to go. So that's a little bit of an overview of where some of the benefits from Signagelive are around corporate communication. Depending on what level you're looking at, there may be some other questions that you have. So do feel free to reach out to us directly and ask those questions. I'll be more than happy to go through any of that in more specific detail if you'd like. Hopefully that's been really useful for you today. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover, but there are some additional elements, so if you do have any questions, do let me know. We're going to go over into the Q&A section now, so any questions, feel free to add them in, and I'll respond to them on the stream. If we don't have any questions by 3:30 or 4 minutes from now, we'll end the stream there. But thank you very much for joining us. We are going to start changing this stream up a little bit. We've got a couple of pre-planned streams that we're going to be doing shortly, and then we're probably going to rotate this into a bi-weekly thing. The main reason for that is we've covered a lot of ground recently, especially given kind of all of the smaller modules within Signagelive and focusing in on them. And we want to give ourselves a little bit of a breadth and leeway to make sure we come and offer you something new every week. So hopefully that's been really useful for you. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask me now. Otherwise, we'll speak to you soon.